Hey there, and welcome to MedDecode. We're on a mission to prove that medical research doesn't have to be so complicated. Each week, we'll break down complex medical terms and turn them into easy-to-understand health knowledge so you can feel confident about your health. Ready to dive in? Let's start decoding.
Okay, let's unpack this. There's been a lot of talk lately about gel manicures. You know, that super glossy, chip-free look that so many of us love. Well, there's been a pretty big regulatory change happening, particularly across the pond, focused on one specific ingredient. So for this deep dive, we're going to get into a chemical called TPO, much easier than Trimethylbenzoyl Diphenylphosphine Oxide, thankfully. We'll look at why the EU just went ahead and banned it, what the science is actually saying, and maybe most importantly, what it means for you when you go get your nails done. Our goal here is really just to give you the clear picture, cut through some of the confusion so you can make choices that feel right for you. So maybe let's start right there. What is this TPO stuff, and why has it been like such a key ingredient in making gel manicures work so well?
Yeah, that's the perfect place to start. TPO is it's what's known as a photoinitiator. Sounds technical, but basically, you know when you put your hands under that UV or LED lamp at the salon? TPO is the ingredient in the polish that grabs that light energy and uses it to kickstart a chemical reaction.
Mm-hmm.
That reaction is what turns the liquid gel into that super hard, shiny, durable finish we all recognize. And it does it incredibly fast, like 60 to 90 seconds.
Okay, so it's the magic behind the quick drying and the toughness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's been a real workhorse because it's just so efficient. Without it, or something similar, you wouldn't get that quick cure and that long-lasting result that makes gel so popular. But here's the big news. As of September 1st, 2025, the European Union has brought in a complete ban on TPO. And that's for all cosmetic products, definitely including gel polishes.
A complete ban.
Wow. It's not just, a warning label or something. It's a strict prohibition. They can't market it. They can't use it. Not even in professional salons. Any products containing TPO that were already on shelves or in salons, they had to be pulled immediately. It's a pretty major step.
Okay, an absolute ban like that sounds serious. What specifically triggered such a strong reaction from the EU regulators?
It boils down to how TPO was reclassified. The EU now lists it as a Category 1B CMR substance.
CMR. Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
Right. So CMR stands for carcinogenic, meaning it might cause cancer, mutagenic might cause genetic changes, or toxic for reproduction. In TPO's case, the specific concern that triggered this ban was toxic for reproduction. It was identified as a reproductive toxicant, meaning there are concerns it could harm fertility.
Ah, I see. Fertility concerns.
Exactly. And, this wasn't totally out of the blue. TPO was already on their radar, listed as a suspected CMR2 substance back in 2019. But the upgrade to Category 1B, which means it's presumed to have this toxic potential in humans based on, mostly animal data, that's what automatically triggered the ban under EU law. It used to be allowed if it was under a 5% concentration, but this new classification means it's banned completely, no matter the amount.
Okay.
It really shows that better safe than sorry approach the EU often takes with chemicals in cosmetics. They tend to act on potential risk.
That makes sense. So the EU's move is based on this reproductive toxicity classification, primarily from animal studies, it sounds like. But the big question for a lot of us is, how does that risk translate to, someone actually getting a gel manicure every few weeks? How strong is that link in the real world?
That really is the core of the debate, isn't it? And yes, you're right. The studies that led to the reclassification were largely done on animals. For instance, some studies showed issues like testicular abnormalities or reduced fertility in animals that were exposed to TPO, often through ingestion, like in their food.
Okay, so feeding studies.
Right. So the potential for harm is flagged by these studies, but then you have to ask, how relevant is that to putting it on your fingernails? And this is where you see different expert opinions. There's a cosmetic chemist, Kelly Dobos, who made the point that, yes, TPO was concerning in those animal feeding studies, but exposure through nail polish is a totally different route of exposure. Her view is that used this way on nails, these materials are actually very safe.
So the way we use it matters a lot in her view.
Precisely. It's about the dose. And the pathway putting it on a nail plate is very different from eating it. But then you have someone like David Andrews from the Environmental Working Group, the EWG. He suggests the exposure is a greater concern for salon workers and also for people who get professional gel manicures really frequently.
So maybe cumulative exposure is the issue there, like nail techs breathing it in or getting it on their skin often.
That seems to be the implication. More frequent, potentially higher levels of contact might change the risk assessment for some people. And then there's Dr. Naila Danani. She's a dermatologist. Her take is kind of in the middle. She says the actual risk from just getting your nails done with TPO is probably very low. But she emphasizes that under EU law, if a chemical gets classified as possibly harmful, like TPO did, a ban is mandatory. It's about the hazard classification, not necessarily proving widespread harm in humans first.
Right, it's the regulatory framework kicking in based on the potential hazard.
Okay, and while we're talking about risks associated with gel manicures, what about the lamps, those UV or LED lights we stick our hands under? There's always been some chatter about skin cancer risks or aging. How does that factor in?
That's a really good point to bring up because it often gets mixed into the same conversation, but it's actually a separate issue from the TPO ban.
Yeah.
Yes, there have been concerns and studies looking at the UV exposure from those curing lamps and potential links to skin cancer or premature skin aging.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that.
But generally speaking, the scientific consensus right now is that the studies linking those lamps directly to significant skin cancer risk are considered weak or inconclusive. It's something people are aware of and maybe take precautions like using sunscreen, but it's not the reason for this ban. The TPO ban is purely about the chemical ingredient itself and its classification as a reproductive toxicant. Got it. So two separate concerns related to the same process. Good to clarify. Okay, so the really good news then, if you're a fan of gel nails, is that gel polish itself isn't going anywhere, right? The ban is super specific to TPO.
Absolutely. Gel manicures are definitely not canceled.
Phew. So let's talk practicalities. What does this mean for your next salon visit? If you're in the EU, it sounds like things have already changed.
Yeah.
But what about elsewhere? What should you be looking for or asking?
Right. So in the EU, salons had to stop using any TPO products immediately after September 1st, 2025. Full stop. Outside the EU, it's different, but the industry is definitely responding. Brands have been working hard to reformulate their polishes. They're finding alternative photoinitiators that can do the job TPO did, giving you that quick cure, the shine, the durability, but without the TPO.
Are there specific names for these alternatives we might see?
Yeah, some examples that came up in the sources are things like TPOL, BAPO, and methylbenzoyl formate. You probably won't see these on a consumer label easily, but the chemists are working with them. So the result is you can still absolutely get a great gel manicure just using these newer TPO-free formulas.
Okay, so the formulas are changing behind the scenes, but how do we know if the salon we go to is using the new stuff? Especially outside the EU where it's not mandated yet.
That's the tricky part because, like you said, you don't usually get handed the bottle to read the ingredients list at the nail station.
Exactly.
So the best advice is really quite simple. Ask. Talk to your nail tech or the salon owner. Ask them directly, are the gel polishes you use TPO-free? Transparency is becoming more important, and your questions actually encourage salons to know their products and be open about them.
That makes sense. Just starting the conversation.
Yeah. And it's also worth knowing that some brands were ahead of the curve. Like Manicurist is mentioned as being TPO-free since way back in 2019. They often focus on excluding other things too, like HEMA or formaldehyde, and use biosourced alternatives where they can, like TPOL. It shows that innovation towards, let's say, cleaner formulas is definitely possible.
Right. So some brands are already there.
Definitely. And, you know, don't forget, there's always the option of traditional nail polish. It's been around safely since the 1920s. Works perfectly well, just doesn't last quite as long. Ultimately, it comes down to you making an informed choice based on what you feel comfortable with, weighing the risks and benefits for yourself.
That's really helpful advice. Ask the question, know your options. Okay, so this ban is EU specific for now, but what's the feeling about the rest of the world, like the US? Is this EU decision likely to cause ripples? Or do different places just play by totally different rules?
Well, historically, the US and the EU do have quite different philosophies when it comes to regulating cosmetics. This TPO situation is actually a perfect example. The EU often works on something called the precautionary principle. Basically, if there's credible scientific evidence suggesting a potential risk, even if it's mainly from animal studies or the harm isn't definitively proven in humans yet, they tend to restrict or ban the substance just in case. They err on the side of caution.
Okay, proactive.
Exactly. Whereas the US FDA generally takes more of a post-market approach for cosmetics. Manufacturers are responsible for ensuring their products are safe, but for most ingredients, there isn't a pre-approval process like there is for drugs. The FDA usually steps in to ban something only after it's been shown to be harmful in use, so it often requires more evidence of actual harm to humans before they act.
So a bit more reactive, perhaps.
You could say that. It's just a different regulatory philosophy.
Yeah.
And it means that, consumers in Europe might be protected from certain chemicals sooner than consumers in the U.S.
So specifically for TPO in the U.S., what's the outlook? Any chance of a similar ban?
Right now, experts don't really expect a federal ban from the FDA anytime soon. TPO isn't currently regulated at the federal level in the U.S. for cosmetics. However, where we might see action is at the state level. California is often a bellwether for this kind of thing.
Right. California leads the way.
Yeah, they banned a list of 26 chemicals in cosmetics back in 2023, often going further than federal regulations. So it's possible we could see states like California or others looking at TPO down the line, especially if consumer awareness and pressure grows. And just quickly, the UK, now separate from the EU, is generally expected to align with the EU on this one. So similar TPO restrictions are likely coming there, maybe towards the end of 2026.
Interesting. So the immediate impact is Europe, but the conversation is definitely becoming more global.
For sure. And consumer awareness plays a huge role in driving that conversation, wherever you are.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here. From understanding what TPO actually does in your gel polish to the science, which, has its nuances behind the EU ban, and those really different regulatory approaches around the world. I think the main thing to take away is that gel manicures themselves aren't going away, but being aware, asking questions at your salon about whether they're using TPO-free products that really empower you. It helps you make choices that fit with your own comfort level about health and ingredients.
Absolutely. It's about being informed. And, that leads to maybe a final thought for you to consider. As we see these regulations changing, like with TPO in the EU, how much do you think consumer demand for TPO-free or generally cleaner beauty options in one part of the world might actually push companies to change their formulas everywhere, even in places where there isn't an official ban yet? Think about how your own questions, your own choices could be part of a bigger shift, pushing the whole industry towards safer products globally.
That's a wrap on this episode of MedDecode. I really appreciate you joining me today. If something we talked about sparked your interest, or if there's a medical term that's been bugging you, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, be a pal and share it with a friend. We'll catch you on the next one.